I was 27 when I met him, and I still remember that first conversation like it was yesterday. He was standing in line at the coffee shop, wearing a coat that looked like it had seen better days. Well worn, but comforting. The kind of coat you can tell someone has owned for years, and it's almost like it becomes a part of them. That was the thing about him, too. You could tell everything about him had a history. He wasn't someone who lived for the future or for the now. He lived with what he'd already known, which in a way made him more interesting than anyone else I had ever met. I used to watch him often at that coffee shop. He would come in at the same time every day, order the same thing, black coffee, no sugar, and sit by the window. For a while I thought about talking to him, but it was one of those silent agreements with myself. You know, the kind of quiet conversation that goes, what if he's not the type of person I think he is? What if he's not even worth it? But one day, I just did it. I made a joke about how he could have at least mixed it up with a little milk. And I swear, it felt like the whole universe gave me a gentle push. He laughed, and that sound, so easy and real, was the start of everything. The early days were simple. We didn't need grand gestures. We'd talk for hours about books we loved, places we'd been, things we regretted. It felt easy to talk to him, easier than it had ever been with anyone before. I wasn't used to feeling like that, and maybe I should have been more cautious, more aware of how good it felt. But I wasn't. I just let it happen. I wanted to let it happen. There was a time when we walked through the city at night, just the two of us, after the cafes had closed and the streets had emptied out. The cool air felt like freedom. We didn't need to go anywhere specific. We'd just walk, our steps echoing in the silence, the city lights flickering off windows, and I would feel like I had all the time in the world. And maybe I did, in those moments. Time slowed, and for once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something better to come along. I knew that I was exactly where I needed to be. I thought it would last forever, that sense of certainty. I can't pinpoint the exact moment it started to change. Maybe it was gradual, or maybe I wasn't paying attention at first. But one day I woke up and realized I wasn't just falling for him anymore. I was already in too deep. I had already let him in, and once you let someone that close, it's hard to go back. That's the danger. It's not the falling, it's the staying. The staying is what asks the real questions. The staying is what challenges you to decide whether you can really make space for someone else in your life without losing yourself. There were days when I couldn't figure out whether he was pulling away or if I was just projecting. We'd sit together and I'd find myself talking about things that didn't matter, empty words, avoiding the things that did. I wasn't sure how to bring up the things that scared me. The future, the inevitable drift of time, the way we were changing. We weren't the same people we had been in the beginning, but I don't think either of us knew how to admit that. It's strange how love can blind you to something that's happening right in front of you. You don't want to face it, because facing it means accepting the end of something you thought was meant to last forever. I could see it in his eyes sometimes, that distant look like he was thinking of something, someone else. It wasn't always clear, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. He wasn't the same, and I couldn't figure out why. Maybe he didn't want to be, or maybe I had already lost touch with who he really was. The worst part was that I didn't know how to ask him about it, to ask if something had changed for him too. I couldn't bring myself to confront it, so instead, I let the silence stretch longer, the way you let a bruise rest, hoping it will heal on its own. But it didn't. I remember the last time we saw each other clearly. We were at that same coffee shop. I could tell something was wrong before we even sat down. He had a certain look on his face, one that I couldn't decipher, not at first, but it wasn't good. Not the way he usually smiled or looked at me with that softness in his eyes. That softness was gone, and in its place there was an edge, a hesitation. He said he had to leave. He said it simply, like it was just another decision, just another thing to be done. But I could see the weight of it on him, too. He didn't want to leave. I don't think he did. But somewhere along the way, he had decided it was inevitable. It was too late for us. Maybe we had outgrown each other. Maybe it had always been temporary, even when it felt like it would last forever. I didn't want to accept it. But I knew in that moment he had already made up his mind. He didn't need me to understand. He just needed me to let go. There are moments in life that are so painful, you don't really feel them until later. Later, when everything is quiet again, and you're left alone with the echo of something that's no longer there. I didn't cry that day. I wanted to, but I didn't. I just nodded, said I understood. I understand. The worst thing you can say to someone when you're torn up inside. But I said it anyway, because what else was there to say? It was over, and I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I couldn't. And then he left. Just like that. Like a page turned. Like a story that had already been written. I walked out of the coffee shop behind him, and I didn't turn back. I don't even remember what I did after that. If I went straight home or wandered around in some dazed stupor. I don't know how long it took for the hurt to settle in, but I remember the silence of my apartment that night. It was empty without him. It was always empty, but now I could feel it. It's strange, isn't it? How the one good thing can sometimes be the thing that breaks you because you've tasted what real love is like, even if it was only for a moment. And maybe that's the worst part, that you know it could have been something beautiful if things had gone differently, if he hadn't left, if I hadn't let my fears take over. But I guess that's life, isn't it? You don't always get to keep the good things. Sometimes you just have to remember them.